Hello, all of you fearless listeners. Welcome to Let Fear Bounce. This is Kim Langling, your host of the podcast that brings you inspiration and motivation each week. Join me as I chat with my awesome guests who share their triumphs, their failures, and how they have thrived despite it all. So get ready to be inspired and empowered and to let your own fears bounce. Now let's dive into this episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. This is Kim Langling, your host, and I am so pleased that you're deciding to spend just a small part of your day with myself and my special guest today, Russell Little. Now, Russell is a writer and a divorce attorney for over 40 years. Now, he's got two books. One book that was out in 2016, which is Murder for Me, and then a second book coming out, folks, that is now available for pre-order on Amazon called Murder by Storm. Now, let's see here. His career was populated by colorful characters and wild cases that eventually fed that writer's imagination of his. Hence, the reason he's got two books out now, or one coming. Russell, thank you so much for being my guest today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I need to hire you. You describe me much better than I could describe myself. That's impressive.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, interesting thing. I worked for attorneys in my 20s for 10 years, and one was a criminal attorney.
I'm
So
so sorry for you.
when I've had people say that more than once. So yes, attorneys' minds, just like people say scientists' minds or engineer minds, y'all have a certain way of thinking and a certain way of looking at the world. So it's interesting to me. I've not had an attorney on the show.
I must tell you one little story about that. You're
Okay.
so right. More than one time, I have gone home after work and got into a discussion with my wife, and she said, "You're not at work now."
Yeah, I believe it. No, yeah, attorney's brains. And the funny thing is, though, working for a criminal attorney for so many years, that sunk into how I view the world and how I would talk and look at things as well. And to me, I think it's a bonus. It gave me, I see things a little differently.
Yeah, you're a cynic now. That's what that means.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. So you were an attorney, living your life, doing your thing, and all of these cases that you would see, were they just kind of like slowly gathering up all these little bits and pieces in your brain, and all of a sudden you're like, I got to put that in a book? Or did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, it's the second. I
Okay.
always wanted to be a writer. I was always the weirdo that when something was going on with people and it was different than what everything else is, I would have to stay and watch. It's like when I was in college once, there was this riot going on, and instead of getting out of there, I had to go watch it because I'd never seen a riot. I'd never been in a riot. And I thought, I've got to do this. This is in college. And after it was over, I spent 2 hours back in the dorm room writing it down so I wouldn't forget it. So I've always been freaked like that.
I just think that's incredibly observant.
It's
I
got
do
me in
I'm a
trouble
people
more than
watcher.
once.
So I'm assuming you're a people watcher.
Oh yeah. We just got back from Rome. I got to tell you, uh, watching the Europeans and some Americans mix, it was like a show. It was like a show. It was the best. It wasn't the best part. The food was the best part. But besides the food, it was one of the best parts.
I was married to a man from Germany for about 10 years. And so I was regularly in Europe, and we would go to different countries, Brussels, France, Germany, of course, Amsterdam, all those places. And it was always interesting for me as an American to see how the different cultures, their personalities and their quirks, but like you said, how they interact with Americans was also incredibly interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. You can learn a lot by trying to immerse yourself. At least I did when I would go to different countries. I would try and learn just a little bit about the culture there so I could immerse myself as best I could because I didn't want to stand out as an ignorant American either.
Oh yeah, it's the worst thing. It's like I had a British couple tell me in Paris at a little restaurant. They were like, "There's too many Americans here. We always try to avoid the Americans." And I told them, "So do we."
Yeah,
They were kind of shocked about that.
because American, okay, from what I witnessed over there, and I can only speak from my own experience, the ones that I witnessed were very rude and had a sense of entitlement. And I often wanted to walk up and say, "You're a guest in this country.
Yeah,
Please remember that.
yeah,
No one here owes you anything."
right. And I know that you learned the little tricks on how to mix because there's little tricks. Like one of the little tricks I learned is at the hotel at night, I would always take a cigar up to the roof. There are always these ceiling bars in Athens and Rome. And it was like in Europe, in America, when you pull out a cigar, everyone leaves. In Europe, when you pull out a cigar, everyone comes over and wants to sit with you. So I could pull up a cigar, have a drink, and all of a sudden I would have 4 or 5 strangers sit around. One night I met an Australian that was a water ski racer. I didn't know that existed. And an F1 engine engineer. And this is the two people I had a cigar with. It was from London. It was amazing. So I know you learned a lot of little tricks too, like that.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just found it fascinating. I loved learning all of those things and then seeing how I could put them, into practice when I would actually arrive where we were at. To see, okay, can I say this the right way? Yeah, I just enjoyed it. I enjoy traveling to different
I could
places.
never say anything the right way. This
I,
West Texas twang of mine
oh,
is
yeah.
my curse. It's my curse. Though everyone outside of Texas really likes it and thinks it's romantic or something. I'm like, how can you think this West Texas twang is romantic?
It's
But
interesting. All the different what people how they hear a different accent because there's so many different accents in America.
exactly. I tell you, the only place that my twang ever worked before I started traveling was in front of a jury. It's something about a West Texas twang that makes jurors trust the lawyer that's speaking.
Interesting. Then if you'd had a Yank like me coming down talking like me, they probably
Oh,
wouldn't.
I ate you up in Houston. I
Yeah.
ate you up.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I bet. Well, hey, let's get on. Let's talk books, shall we?
Okay. What are you reading?
What am I reading? I am reading now I can't remember. I think it's called Commencement. I picked it up at a thrift store. Never heard of the author before, and it's about 4 women that went to Smith College and where they're at now in their lives.
Okay. I know those books.
Yeah, just one
Yeah.
of those ones that you don't really have to think much. It's just for pleasure read. That's what I'm reading.
Every third book, I need an escapist book. I actually read shoot 'em up science fiction type stuff.
Okay.
So I'm
Gone in
rereading.
phases. I've gone in phases
Yeah,
with what I read.
exactly.
Yeah, right now I'm just in the, what I just explained, that type of book. And then, sometimes I'll get into like, oh, Balducci, David Balducci. His are like it's like crime, drama, stuff like that, thriller kind of all
Mm.
mixed in one, where it's I don't know. There's a book I think he wrote The Camel Club. I don't know.
Um,
You have to look it
I
up.
I
Really good books.
reread Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and Brothers Karamazov every year. That's kind of a thing I do every year uh, to what sharpen iron against iron.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I have to read some science fiction because that's so heavy.
Right. Yeah. You got to let everything else settle. So what got you, I know I can kind of guess, I guess because, of your background as an attorney for so long and all of what you witnessed and the people that you met helped to build the characters, I am assuming, in the books that you write. You said you've always wanted to be a writer. what made you start at the time in your life that you did start eventually?
Okay, this is an interesting story too. As you can tell, I tell story. I speak through stories. When I was a baby lawyer, the old lawyer that trained the new lawyers, he would always, whenever you did something wrong, he'd always bring you in the office and he'd tell you a story, and you had to figure out what he was talking about, what you did wrong, and how he wants you to fix it from his story. So the story to that is when I was 50 years old. My youngest son was leaving for college, and he kind of took me aside before he left, and he said, "Dad, you've been writing you've been starting over and over and over writing a book for 20 years. You're running out of time. You need to finish it." That was
Running
what he
out of
said.
time.
That's what he said.
Yeah, I guess when you're in your 50s, you're old.
Yeah, I was old, he thought. So he was right. I needed to finish it. And I'd gotten rid of the last kid to college. So I finished it.
And you got it out there, and it's been out there since 2016.
Right. It was very successful. I didn't start writing the next book for about a year because I was all into the marketing of books. Because, that's really, if you're going to sell a book, and I really was, it was part of my intellectual purpose to have my book out, because I don't believe you've completed the intellectual exercise unless everyone can read your book and see how stupid you are, right? You got to
Right.
expose yourself.
Right.
So I worked for a year to expose myself as fast as I could. And then it took me a couple of years. I'm a slow writer because I have so many other projects. So it took me a couple of years to write it. And then after that, I was searching for a publisher, and now I have a great one. And uh, they put me on the fast track and put me on a schedule faster than I want to be, which is good for me.
So you're rolling along. You've got your second book coming out. It's on pre-order right now, on Amazon. That's quite a from 2016 to 2024.
Well, that's true, but we reissued the book because when I got a new publisher, they wanted all the covers to match because there's going to be three books, right? So we
Gotcha.
reissued Murder for Me in May. Uh,
Okay.
I've been doing podcasts, and we've been doing promotion since. And then in August, the publisher shifted it over to Murder by Storm and promoting it. And so we've started that. And Audible books come out a few months after the published books, which we both know you got to do Audible books now, because over 60% of the purchased books are Audible books now.
That's
And
a lot.
especially my readership does Audible books. And frankly, my book is perfect for an Audible book, I think. Just not my voice, because you couldn't listen to a whole book of Texas twang.
Maybe not. I don't know. I never have. So,
Trust me, I can hardly listen to myself.
yeah. Yeah, those folks, the folks that do the recordings. I know a lot of folks, they record their own voice for their own books. I don't know if I could do that for mine. I think it would super time consuming. I mean, it'd be a lot of time, I think, for me, I think. I truly appreciate those that have that kind of voice that can really bring your story to life. I that's a skill and a talent, I believe, for those folks. So I appreciate those ones that do that because it's a lot of work involved, but they also have to be able to tell your story in a way that just reels those readers in that they want to keep on listening. They don't want to hit that pause or stop button.
Right. And the nuance of a professional reader who can who you can listen to, and you actually can tell that it's different characters. You can tell if it's a man, a woman, a child, an old man. Uh, that's important. That's important to the quality of the experience you have. And I can't do that.
I've not tried. I don't know if I can, but maybe I'll try and just play around sometime and see if I'm able to do that. just it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. So, I appreciate I appreciate those that do that for a living because that's definitely a skill. So, are both of your books going to be on Audible?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
And when the third book comes out, it'll be on Audible too.
Awesome.
But uh, because that is the wave of the future.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
However, the last book I just bought the next book I'm going to read. I bought a hard copy because there are certain types of books. It's one of those nonfiction, historical examination books. You got to read those words.
Yeah, and there for me there are times where just like I had said, you asked what book I was reading. I said I picked up a book at a thrift store. Sometimes you just want to hold the book
Yeah,
and you want to
it's
turn the page and smell that musty smell and
yeah,
yeah.
and you want it staring at you, lying on the table. When are you going to read me? You
Right.
want that?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's nothing, yeah, you can't compare,
Yeah.
and I have a Kindle and I have hundreds of books on my Kindle. And a lot of times I use that, but every once in a while I will find myself saying, no, I'm going to go to my own personal library and pull out a book I haven't read in years.
Plus, they're pretty.
Yes. Yes, it's nice to look the way they look.
Right. Like
Yeah.
this picture behind me, this was a used bookstore in Durango, Colorado, on the second floor of one of those bait shops. And I walked up and saw this. It was so beautiful, I had to take the picture. And it was such a beautiful picture, I had to put it in my background on these podcasts because it's just beautiful. And we actually did an Airbnb on a ranch outside Durango, Colorado during the pandemic. That's where we stayed. So it was pretty awesome.
That would be awesome, and I love that picture. That it because it makes you want to just find a cozy old, really wore-in leather chair.
There were no leather chairs,
But
those
that's
wood
what
chairs.
brings to mind in my head, an old, worn-out leather chair that you can tell that has had hours upon hours of people sitting in it reading.
Yeah, it was a beautiful place.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. Love it. So your books, we're gonna get back. You were writing. How did that, and you waited till your 50s. You had been writing for years, and then you're like, all
Right.
right, got to get this done. Your son said, get it done. What made you choose? And I know that you're attorney and all that, but what was that? Was there one thing that made you choose? I want to write about murder. I want to be, a murder mystery. That's the type of genre that you wanted to go into.
Well, I had a story. The story starts off in Murder for Me, and there's this, and over the course of my life, there were a few people whose personalities and character and who they were just burned a place in my memory of this is a thing that I have to write about. And the antagonist in the book is a grouping of two people that I met during my life that you when you read the book, you would I've had so many readers say, how can that be? How can that be? And I'm like, that's what I thought when I saw it.
Yeah.
And there's a story of struggle in the book, indirectly, tangentially about the story, that was a struggle that kind of burned in my memory too of someone. And I had to write about that because it was so tragic. And I had a story from these characters, but the most important thing is I had these beautiful characters that I had to write about. And part of the trouble in the first book is I had readers want to know, why did X happen? And so I had to immediately start working on the second book, because the second book answers, why did X happen? I can't tell much more than that because it's a thriller. You got to read
Right,
it.
right. You don't want to
But
ruin
part
it.
of the purpose in the second book was to write from a perspective that was completely alien to me, which was from a woman's perspective. And I must say, I had to work hard intellectually to get it right. And
Oh, I
you
believe you.
can
Yeah.
you can tell when someone's writing something and they don't have it, right?
Yeah.
And that was the intellectual challenge of the second book, was to get that right.
That's interesting that I'm glad you shared that. That's interesting because I've not talked to many authors that say, when I was speaking from a female voice or vice versa, um, the difficulty of it. That would be difficult. I think, just as for me, I think it would be difficult to write from a man's perspective. I would have to go and ask many different men certain things in order to even maybe get a glimmer of how I could be the voice of this male character. Did you do research like that or anything like that?
Well, two parts to that. Number one, I've had several women authors come to me and say, how do I do this? How do I do that? And don't think I didn't. I had one particular editor who worked with me intent. In fact, one time she was so mad at me because I got it wrong that she actually threw the chapter at me, threw it at me, papers everywhere in a cigar store. The whole place was like, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? I said, but after I didn't talk to her for a couple of days, but after that, I got it right because it's hard work. So, yes, I had good editors helping me. And, that's the only way, except for Hemingway, that's the only way good writers can get things right. You got to have a good editor.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So you've got your second book coming out, which is Murder by Storm. Now, off mic, before we started this show, you have a backstory of why the word storm, why it's Murder by Storm in this book. Share a little bit about that backstory that you were sharing with me.
Okay, this is important. This is crucial to the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, I raised my family, practiced law in Houston for 41 years. And because everyone in the world knows, hurricanes hit Houston. And the last one that hit Houston, well, until this year, was Harvey. And Harvey, the hurricane actually slowly creeped towards Houston. So we knew it was coming for a couple of weeks because it was moving so slowly. And so you had this buildup of 2 weeks of panic.
Mm.
And you saw all the inhumane actions of people in a panic. Like the story of my publisher when she was in a grocery store and the man in front of her emptied the grocery store of not 9 big cases of water because that's all there was. And she just looked at him like, you you can't be human, right? And so it was panic like that for 2 weeks. And then the hurricane, and there was the story, like the homeless. They didn't know there was a hurricane coming. They were trying to get them off the street. There was this, and I lived downtown in a high rise, and there was this old lady. She was homeless. She actually lived on the bench across the street from the high rise and from the park. That's where she lived. And I'm a typical downtown type person. I don't really pay attention to the homeless. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I'd always seen this lady. And so the hurricane is going to be there in a few hours. The first limbs, because it hurricanes hit you in waves, and
Right.
they're small waves, and they get bigger and bigger, and then the big body of the hurricane hits. So it was the same day, and she was one of the few homeless that was not gone. So I actually went over there trying to get her, offering to take her to the shelter. She wouldn't do it. It made her angry. Then I tried to get her under the overpass. There was an overpass where 2 office buildings also has an office building above the street. So it's well covered for the whole block. I couldn't get her to go anywhere. So I was like, let me help you. She was absolutely convinced I was trying to steal her stuff,
Oh,
and she wouldn't go. And I finally gave up. The hurricane hit within hours, and I never saw her again,
oh,
ever again. I'll never know what happened. And the hurricane hit, and it sat on Houston for 5 days.
oh, goodness. Yeah.
There was 52 inches of rain. So it was a complete catastrophe. And I lived downtown across the park from the refugee center. And so I spent those 5 days helping the thousands and thousands of refugees whose homes were wiped out. And the National Guard would sometimes helicopter them in, sometimes truck them in, helping them get clean clothes, get some semblance of privacy and uh, warmth and security and whatever you could do, right? And then after that, after the hurricane left, you had whole neighborhoods wiped out. And Houston's the type of town that you move to for a job. So there's a lot of people that move to Houston. They haven't met anyone yet. They don't have any friends. They don't have any family. So they're like sitting in their wiped out house that's had water to the ceiling. Everything's ruined and everything smells like you can't imagine. And they're like, what do I do? And so I joined other groups. We would go into these houses where they had no one to help them. We didn't know them. We didn't care what race, what the political beliefs are. We didn't care about that.
Right.
These were people that needed help. And we would go in, gut their home, which is basically you rip everything out, even the walls, get it ready so they can start repair. And then we'd go to the next. And the whole city was like that. It was unbelievable. And I wanted to record and tell other people about the unbelievable things you see during a hurricane. And I thought the best way to do it was put it in the book. Also, you know, considering what the police are busy doing and what floodwater does to evidence, it's a great time to commit a crime. So I
Right.
thought, why not?
Yeah. Well, and you're right, because everybody is busy elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. See, and I love hearing how different stories and different books have come about, because it's not all the time just someone sitting there thinking, an author sitting there thinking, oh, what can I write about next? Oh, I have this little idea. I think a lot, and tell me if it's true for you, that you write, and a lot of what you write, you're inserting a lot of personal experience. You might not share that in the book, but a lot of maybe it's your perspective or your emotions or your feelings on it, but you're inserting that into your characters and into the storyline of your book. Is that true for you?
I used to say you were wrong. I now know you were right.
Interesting. Why would you used to say I was wrong?
Because I'm a cynic, just like you, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't believe that all of my characters, because I have some really bad characters in these, I didn't believe that all my characters had a piece of me in it. But I now am convinced that every character I have, no matter how bad, has a piece of me in it. I'm in there somewhere. It's just unavoidable.
I was going to say you have to be. If you're the one creating them, they're coming from you. So there's something in there.
Yeah.
So what made you want to go this I know you said you've been writing for years, but what made you want to go this murder mystery route? I mean, was it because of being an attorney and what you had seen, or was it something else that was like, no, that's what you want to go, that's how your brain's going, that's what you want to write?
It's murder. A murder thriller is where the story took me there. I
Okay.
didn't take the story there. The story took me there. It's
Okay.
a story of these characters and the clash between them, and that's where it took me. Also, I must say that I can't say what I was about to say because I'd be telling too much. Let me just say there are a lot of things in a murder thriller that I find very challenging and that I really, uh, you know, I take it from my own experience, and but also to some of these things you write, some of the things that we read and we just read over it because that's when we read murder thrillers and that sort of thing. If you're going to write it authentically and smoothly and beautifully, it's a much harder challenge to write it than it is to read it. And that seems obvious, but uh, that intellectual challenge of doing it and doing it authentically was a part of it. Which the real reason I write is the intellectual challenge, right? And so that's part of it.
Okay. I think it would be hard. Now, see, what you write is not something I could write. I don't know if I'd be able to have my brain go so dark.
I practiced divorce law for 40 years.
That's what I know
I
you got.
mean,
Yeah.
I live on the dark side.
You live in the dark. You come from the dark. Well, that makes sense. But it's always interesting to meet and talk with other authors about when they write something just so completely different than what I do. I find it interesting and enthralling because I also learn so much from talking to other authors, and how they see things and what makes them tick. So thank you for sharing your story on that. I appreciate it, and I'm sure that the listeners appreciate it as well. So you've got these two books. You said it's going to be a 3-book series. So are you working on that third book right now, or is that something you're going to start working on in the next year?
I'm working on it right now. I know I heard what you said about next year. You got that from my previous story. No, I'm working on it right now. I am working. Did you ever read Dunces of the Confederacy? Confederacy of the Dunces. Did you ever read that book? There's
No.
this famous character. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning book. And there's a character in there that he only gets one right, but he gets this one character so right, you can't ever forget him. And my challenge in the next book is not only to tell the story, but to write with a character that you cannot forget. And that's what I'm working on. And I just had a breakthrough last week on that. So I'm pretty excited about it.
That's awesome. I was going to say that's got to be really exciting. Well, good for
Yeah.
you. And yeah,
Thank you.
good luck with all of that and enjoy that journey as you're traveling through it and getting this third book ready to be put out into the world. This book here, Murder by Storm, folks, again, you can pre-order it. It is coming out in October of 2024. So very shortly after you're listening to this, I'm assuming it'll be out. So you can pre-order now on Amazon. Russell, thank you so much for being my guest on Let Fear Bounce. I truly appreciate your time and sharing your background and why you do what you do. So I ask all of my guests, first off, let folks know where they can find you. And then after that, I would like you to toss out a nugget of hope to my listeners because I ask all of my guests to do that at the end of the show. So first off, where can folks find you and all your good stuff?
They can find me at russelllittleauthor.com. And
Well,
if
that's
they're on,
simple.
yes, if they're on Facebook, they can go to Russell Stories and follow me there because uh I leave posts on Russell Stories about where I'm being interviewed, how my interviews went, how my work is going, and also about different books. Like I just posted something about Confederacy of the Dunces.
Awesome.
The hopeful comment is I was real close to it before when I was telling the story of the hurricane. And the you know, we live in such a divided world right now. Everyone's hating each other and wanting to be in their own bubble. But let me tell you, when that hurricane hit, after it hit, before, when everyone was in panic and stress, there was a lot of bad behavior. But afterwards, people all across the city really came together, helping each other because people needed help. And they weren't worried about any of that. They were just helping people. And I got to tell you, that was the second part of the life changing experience for me, seeing that that's possible. Now, I don't want to be in a place where the stimulus is bad enough to drive everyone that way
Right.
because it was awful.
Yeah.
But when people needed help, their neighbors were there. It was a life-changing experience.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah, I believe it. Well, thank you for
The
sharing that.
worst,
So,
even in the modern world we live in, there are examples of everyone coming together and bonding together and helping each other make it. People can breach these borders still that we live in.
that is right. That is right. Breach the borders with kindness. Perfect. Perfect little nugget. Thank you very much for tossing that out there. And thank you very much for being my guest today. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time and the stories that you've shared. And I'd love to have you back on again sometime next year and we can talk about how the book's doing, your new book that's coming out, and about the one that you're currently writing. So I'd love to have you back on if you're open to that.
I would love to. I'm kind of sad that we're finished because I've been having a really good time.
Well, thank you. And I know the half hour goes really fast, doesn't it? It just flies.
Has it been a half hour?
It has been actually 33 minutes. But thank you once again for being my guest today. I truly appreciate it. It's been a true blessing. And everybody out there listening, thank you so much for tuning in another week and another episode. New episodes drop each Wednesday, folks. So keep on tuning in, won't you? And subscribe. Leave some reviews if you'd like. That's always very helpful to any show. I am Kim Langling, your host of Let Fear Bounce. Everybody be well, stay well, and above all, be blessed. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Let Fear Bounce. I do realize that your time is precious, and I appreciate that you've decided to spend just a small part of your day with myself and my guest. I hope that you found inspiration and motivation tucked into this conversation today. And remember, every triumph and failure is a step towards thriving. So stay fearless, stay inspired, and join me each week with more inspiration from amazing guests from all over the world. Until then, stay fearless, my friends, and let fear bounce.